Buonasera a tutti. Good evening and welcome to the Italian Radio Hour. Io sono Viviana and I would like to welcome back our regular listeners and also welcome any new listeners. Also, be sure to like us on Instagram and Facebook at the Italian Radio Hour and subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch up on any past video interviews. Vorrei dare il benvenuto ai nostri ascoltatori da tutto il mondo. Grazie per essere con noi anche oggi mentre continuiamo il nostro viaggio per l'Italia e la cultura italiana. Today we will be traveling to the beautiful region of Basilicata, maybe defined as the ankle of the booth nested between Puglia and Calabria, with the book and documentary author Anita Aloisio. And through Anita, we will discover some of the culinary secrets as she traveled the Basilicata region, the region of her father, to meet with villagers and also five-star chefs and also amateur cooks who help her recreate and share specialty dishes and recipes, along with Anita's very own personal experiences. Ma prima, pubblicità. Parli italiano? Do you want to learn, improve, or master your Italian? Istituto Mondo Italiano can help. Located in the heart of Regent Square, Mondo Italiano offers small group classes and one-on-one private tutoring to help you learn Italian in no time. Visit us online at www.istitutomondoitaliano.org. Allora, benvenuta al programma Anita. How are you?
Hello, I'm very well. Thank you for having me. Buongiorno a tutti.
I think you might be our first guest from Montreal. So I'm actually, very, very happy to reach out, on the other side of the border. Montreal, it's a beautiful city that I have visited. And so I'm very, very jealous.
Are you right now jealous? Because it's still very, very cold and snowy. We're still in the midst of getting through a snowstorm. So,
oh my goodness! So hopefully
yes.
they'll go away soon. So I was very fascinated as soon as I saw your book, and then we started to talk a little bit and get to know more about the project to have this conversation, because there seemed not to be a lot of information, especially also in English, for this beautiful region, Basilicata. And also it might be a region that people might overlook initially when they plan a trip to Italy, and it might take maybe a traveler has been there maybe a couple of times but definitely not to miss. Maybe the usual suspect might be Matera.
Yeah.
As also the capital of culture a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But before we dive into all the secrets you're going to tell us about it, I wanted to find out a little bit about your background, where your family is from, and whether you you were born in Italy, arrived to Canada, or if you were born in Canada and your parents were directly from Italy.
Okay, yes, thank you for that. So my background, so I was born in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, to Italian immigrant parents. They had just recently arrived a year prior my birth. They were part of the fourth and last important wave of immigration of the late 1960s and early 1970s in Canada, or in Montreal, for that matter of fact. So I was born here, and I was very, very close to my Italian roots and also language. It was very mandatory to speak Italian in the home, and also I attended the Saturday Italian classes. It was only until maybe when I was as a young adult that I began also to take an interest in visiting Italy, the Italy that I had not seen in my younger years. And that's the more, let's say, the cities that were the more touristic cities. Prior to that, I would go back to visit Italy maybe 3 times before the age of 20, but back to the village of my parents. Now, my mom is from the Neapolitan area, so near the Amalfi Coast, in the province of Salerno, and my father from the region of Basilicata. And so as a child, I navigated through these between these two realities. And for me, that's what Italy looked like and smelled like and felt like. So my background, I always navigated through in between this Italian identity that was transported into a North American continent, and furthermore transported into a francophone province reality. And so the Italian community there had its own very stratified sense of identity and willingness to maintain language and sense of tradition and identity.
Okay. And
Yeah.
that was actually going to be my next question. If you could give us some generic characteristics of what the Italian Canadian experience is like, and whether the fact of being in a French-speaking province affects that experience, yes or no, and how?
Absolutely, it does. Absolutely does. It's a great question. As you know, the influx of immigration of Italian immigrants into Canada, and in particular into Quebec, started later. We're like a generation behind that of the American. So the fact that Quebec and Montreal establishes its own sense of identity and linguistic identity really impacted, in particular, the Italian community that is very numerous. It is, we're over 320,000 individuals that self-identify as being of Italian descent. There might be more, but this is the way statistics poses their questions. And so we're like a small city or a big village within the Montreal urban centers. We have great impact. We're majorly trilingual, and that is because and majorly trilingual, and at the very beginning, our affiliation to the Francophone reality was much stronger than it is today, simply because of the phonetic similarities between Italian and French, and also because of religion. The Francophone majority in Quebec was a majority Catholic, and so that those were two very strong common points that led the beginning of the Italian immigration. Individuals have more affinity towards the Francophone reality. And then afterwards, when political upheaval started in the late mid 60s and early 1970s, I won't get into that. That's more complicated, but what you should know is that's what distinguishes the Italian community of Montreal with the rest of the immigrated Italians in Canada, and of course the States, because we had to negotiate between maintaining our Italian roots and language, as well as learning a third language, this affiliation with the Francophone reality and the Catholic religious affiliation, and also learning English, which for a long time was the international, and still is, the international language or pathway towards ascendance to success. So that's what differentiates the Italian Montreal reality.
So you obviously wear many different hats, because you're a director, you're a researcher, you're a writer, but you're also the president of an association for Italian women in Quebec. Can you give us a feel of some of the activities that your group might facilitate and be involved in?
Well, excellent. Thank you. So we're becoming more and more popular than if you got the gist of our association. So it's an organization named Alliance Donna, Italian Women of Quebec, and basically it was founded about 3 years ago, just prior to COVID. And what we noticed is, although there are many organizations and community organizations whose mandate is to represent the needs of the community in various spheres, we found that there wasn't a place or a hub that would actually represent the contributions of the Italian immigrant woman in Quebec. And those contributions are very stratified. They often were not put on a pedestal. And we're talking about contributions at the cultural level, social level, political level, scientific level, we're everywhere. But yet there was no hub where we could offer representation, we can offer mentorship, we can offer scholarship, we can offer cocktail themed events. And this would mean that women from all walks of life could find a place and a space to express their interest and to express the difficulties and also to get to know each other, not work within a vacuum. And the other part is to assure that we tell our own stories, and not that these stories are or these experiences are told by a third party that does not have any experience within the Italian woman experience in Quebec. So we took that initiative, and it's become quite successful. We've collaborated with a renowned museum in Montreal just about a year and a half ago that was that planned an exhibit on the experience or l'italianité à Montréal. That's the way they termed it. So what's Italian about Montreal? And when we heard about that, we wanted to collaborate them almost by. We really encouraged them that it was important that we have a say, because we wanted women to have a just place in the exhibit. And so this paved the way to saying, we also want to be able to tell our stories. And there's another project we are also looking at, and that would be one to honor the women that contributed in the development of the textile industry in Montreal in the mid-50s. And that was a way for them to assure vitality and survival for their families, in addition to everybody else working. So this is important for us, and it's important to highlight also the artists, the authors, the filmmakers, the scientists, and we bridge the gap, and we create we create that link. So just for instance, on March 8th right now, and we're also working with the organizations that are already present that have been majorly, male-centered. And although we're open to conversation, we still take a very firm stand as to what we represent, right? So March 8th, on International Women's Rights Day, we are collaborating with the Order Sons of Italy, the Quebec version, in their official launch of their new denomination that would include the women in their title. So in French, it would be l'Ordre des Fils et des Filles d'Italie, Order of Sons and Daughters of Italy. So on March 8th, this is the unveiling that will happen at the Casa d'Italia of Montreal.
Wonderful. So it looks, and then I think we're going to dive into your current project, but I think you have taken that conversation one step further with one of your previous productions, your first documentary, which was Straniera come donna, where then you create a comparison a little bit about who between the ones that stayed behind,
yes,
the ones that moved to Quebec, which I'm sure will be definitely worth having a separate conversation about. So then, as for us that, again, we have these multiple souls that sometimes we are able to reconcile, and sometimes one pulls the other. Can you tell us a little bit about how your journey towards Basilicata started? Just because you had your father from Basilicata didn't mean that Basilicata was calling you. So at some point, it looks like it was a conscious effort, something that you couldn't deny anymore, that you
Absolutely.
had to.
Yeah. Yes, you got it right. Absolutely. And it's in line with my first film, Straniera come donna. And that's why it was actually filmed in Basilicata. So it was one of my first times that I set foot there, and I wanted to analyze how I would feel if I were to have been born there and have lived through that experience. And so that was the beginning of my interrogation and my link to the land, and trying to see how I would react. And it was the pivotal person in all of this, in all of my journeys here in my filmmaking that led to Basilicata Secrets project is really my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, whom I've never met. Sorry, not my maternal grandmother, my paternal grandmother. I've never met my maternal grandparents, unfortunately. And so because I carry her name, my full name is Maria Antonietta Anita. In Montreal, carrying her name was quite a feat, right? You're in a French-speaking province as an Italian, as a daughter of Italian immigrants, and that was very difficult to just in terms of identity to figure things out for yourself. So in exploring Basilicata in my first film and looking at women that would have been my peers, it led me to look at what legislation in Quebec affected my journey. So that's my second film, Les Enfants de la Loi 101, growing up with Bill 101. Bill 101 is the French charter, is the official charter of the French language, adopted almost 50 years ago in Quebec, and affected all children of immigrants and many other and all Quebecers. And then my third film, looking at Italian Canadian or Italian Quebecois artists that produce music in other languages other than in French or in English, and how would that be recognized here in Quebec when they're trying to self-identify with they're trying to promote their only Francophone or English language, right? So those are very heavy topics, but at the same time, it's what also motivated me to write, to continue to explore in a very jovial but human way the land of Basilicata, and how would I do it not only on behalf of myself, but encountering the women, the aunts, the grandmas, the friends, the cousins that I never had. We lived a very isolated life because we were the only family that immigrated in Montreal. The rest of my relatives are all in Basilicata or in the surrounding regions of Salerno, Naples. So the book helped me reimagine what my childhood could have been like. And it also helped me put into perspective the culinary traditions that I grew up with and give them some sort of meaning. So in essence, I met the chefs, I met the nonnas, I met the aunts that I've never had the chance to have a relationship with, but yet at that specific time, while creating a dish, the relationship was set, and so I created that link. So the food became a pretext to further explore my link to the land and further explore my need to sort of establish my identity there. So it was very simple, but yet very meaningful.
Okay, so I'm going just to play out about 30 seconds worth of your documentary. Just for those of you that might be joining the interview on YouTube, you will also enjoy these beautiful images. Otherwise, if you're just on audio, enjoy these 30 seconds worth of beautiful music.
Tanta pasta e lenticchie, pasta e ceci, pasta e fasullo, pasta e cembra, pasta e scocca. Tutto pasta e per quando ero piccolo.
Okay, so I know that we want to probably see more and hear more of it, but let's talk about the preparation to this embarking on this journey. I'm sure you had some jitters, also getting excited on one end because you had this whole project ahead of you, but also that emotional component. So tell us a little bit about how you plan out your trip, and also what regions, what itinerary, what cities or provinces you wanted to cover in your
Sure. So Basilicata, I was also discovering it on myself. So the preparation was that one of my priorities was to have my team, my creative team, be from the region, so that they would indicate how to navigate Basilicata coast to coast. So with the help of the Tourism Board of Basilicata, who also supported this project, I was put into contact with a photographer of the region. She is actually from Montescaglio, so a little village from the Basilicata region as well. And she's she took all the pictures here in the book, and several others that I couldn't put in. Also, what we call a fixer today, but at the time it wasn't a fixer. She was really like the coordinator and also a great foodie. And she was the one that created a list and an itinerary for me, and to make sure that we would actually traverse the region from one coast to the other. And there were significant places, for example, Matera, Bernalda, where, of course, Francis Ford Coppola's grandfather is from, that we would go, obviously, to Muro Lucano, where the village where my father is from. We would visit Castelmezzano. We would go in the Albanese regions that I didn't know existed. So what you're seeing right there, thank you for putting it up there. So we went to visit Sant'Albanese, and that is really like at the end of the world. Like I felt like I was at the tip of I would almost fall off and plunge into the water. And really, there was an Albanese an immigrant population there, very small. And she actually, was very nationalistic about her Albanian roots, sorry, and spoke almost like a broken Italian, and you can tell that there was some other root there, linguistic root. And she cooked up a storm in the smallest of places, like smaller than my office. And I don't have a very small office. And her house was the only restaurant of the little village. So we went from the more touristy places to the very secluded cavernesque places as well. We went to where is it? Right here, I'm gonna name it. It's a place called San Paolo Albanese Chiaromonte. So San Paolo Albanese, next to it was Chiaromonte, where they make their own beer, their own peperone kruszki, which is peperone kruszki is really like a specialty. They call it the Ferrari of La Basilicata, meaning it's red Ferrari, but it is a come si dice il peperone in Italiano, in inglese?
Pepper.
Oddio.
Like
So the pepper, but it's it's
like
not
almost
even
like a banana pepper, but not
right.
Red.
It's not, and it's not a chili pepper because it's not very hot at all. But it's just so tender. It's really like it's a GP, jeep as they call it. It's from the region only, and the way they prepare it and fry it in a specific temperature becomes crispy as a potato chip, but it's not a potato chip. So the itinerary was planned not to have it wasn't Alatucci, for example, and I do like his work, but it was really from a grassroots perspective, meaning something that was extremely modest, local, unpretentious, and that it would allow to give voice to the main characters. And the main characters were, again, like I said, the aunt, the mother, the restaurateur, the only woman chef in Basilicata, Maria Antonietta Santoro, who has a beautiful restaurant now and has an Étoile Michelin, has a Michelin star. So it wasn't the motivation, and the motivation behind tracing the path was not so much as though, to render it attractive to tourists, it wasn't, but it was to bring unveiling of the beauty of this land. And so in that way, it became attractive and it became humble.
Yes. And even in your book, it's not a recipe book, but as you have defined it, it's a culinary journey because again of the whole experience. And also in some of the videos, for instance, there was a quick image also in the promo. This was the family where the daughter has a vineyard. So just seeing also the younger generation actually saving, so to speak, the land and using that 21st century ingenuity to put it to use and turn it into a vineyard. And then I don't want to say the contrast, but then the life at home with the mom that has prepared dishes for you. And one of the things that caught me, which I have seen it before, and also I don't know if you can pull out your book, but you talk about and your reminiscence of that, and you thought that had actually some sort of more than the meaning, it was done because that would help the product to turn out better. So I don't know if you want to read something of your book.
I will, and that's in relation to so everything Every ingredient is sacred. So every morsel, everything that goes into every recipe has a function, has a raison d'être, and it is always treated with the utmost respect. And when we talk about the flour and the grain, it's a sign, it was always been a sign of people's richness. How rich are they? And prosperity. So in relation to one of the chapters with that Maria Antonietta Santoro from Il Ristorante del Becco della Civetta, she is like a force of nature, and she embodies this. And this is just the last paragraph of this chapter, where she's actually making cavatellini con crema di fagioli e cicoria e salsiccia. The knowledge of women in matters of cuisine remains undervalued. Their expertise is generally recognized to comply with their domestic responsibilities and not to launch a career in the restaurant business. Women are only to be cooks at home, whereas men are given the privilege and title of being chefs in restaurants, but hardly the ones who cook for the family. Antonietta defined this paradox. Over time, she expanded her business from a small 10 to 12 place setting to a reception hall restaurant with a grand fenestration architecture giving onto the steps of the angled mountaintop that resembles the beak of an owl. The inspiring image defines the character of Castelmezzano and the restaurant's name, Il Becco della Civetta. Recently, she opened a second restaurant in Matera. Antonietta's extended family and relatives left the area during harsh economic times and settled across the Americas. Confronted with the choice of immigrating, Antonietta remained put and learned to respect it and adapt to the treacherous yet natural cycles and rhythms of her land. The innate philosophy cultivated among her ancestors continues to guide Antonietta's approach to life, to her cuisine, and her relationship with family and friends. Feisty, strong, and proud, she seems to embody the collective imperial strength of Castelmezzano's women. Suffering from a migraine when we arrived, she candidly and with no-nonsense charisma looked straight into the camera lens and declared that she was not feeling well and would be making something simple. Che ne dici? Facciamo I cavatellini veloce veloce? What do you think? Shall we make cavatellini quickly? So cavatellini is derived from the verb cavare. The term illustrates the action to carve the pasta into rounded hollow bits. Antonietta systematically cleared her workstation, gathered the flour in a pile, and etched on it the sign of the cross with her hands. I had seen this rite done before by my mother. In the past, I thought this crisscross gesture helped the dough to rise, allowing for the air to circulate as it baked. Instead, it is a ceremonial ritual that recognizes wheat as a divine symbol. To this day, each time I make dough, I repeat the gesture.
Wonderful, wonderful. And in addition to these traditions, because I mean, it's also, I think, a very private, and it's also an honor to enter the homes and these rituals that are repeated are somehow sacred in their own simplicity. So you have visited some other family businesses that you have been exposed to during your journey?
Yes, well, you know, I visited the Villa Cirigliani. I went to the Palazzo Margherita. Palazzo Margherita is now the palazzo owned by the filmmaker Coppola, and he also is very, although it was his grandfather, so there's a few generations that separate him, very attached to the land. It's very visceral, this attachment to the land, and also the motivation for him buying this Palazzo Margherita, really nestled at the top of this small town. It's very difficult to get there, but once you walk inside, it's you know, very grand, and it's a luxurious hotel, which, by the way, has gardens inside and produces local produce. And so one of the really very, very cute, simple recipes, sono I lampascioni di Francis, I call it in the book. So lampascioni is a sort of like an onion bulb that is spontaneously grows within the ground of Basilicata. So people from Basilicata say it's exclusive from Basilicata. Those from Calabria say we have those here too, but we don't name them as lampascioni. There are other things, but they're exclusive. So they all are very territorial, but in that case, it was very beautiful to see the chef use the bulb, so a very simple, humble ingredient, cut it, half it, but not thoroughly, so that it becomes a flour when you plunge it into extremely hot oil. And so it kind of expands into a beautiful flour. And those are a trademark at the Bernalda Palazzo Margherita, and a trademark for when you go visit the Coppola Palace. And we shot this before actually the late Anthony Bourdain had gone there. So we started something really avant-garde, and then well, he had more notoriety than I did, justly so, but these are the see, so a person with such success and such notoriety was able to offer these simple recipes because of his because of the fact of his motivation to nurture the land and recognize the importance to do so, and the importance that it played and the role that it played in his life. And this is it. So food played an important role in my life in growing up, and not so much because of the physical food, but because of all the secrets and all the stories and all the relationships attached to it. And those were the common threads throughout my encounters.
Okay, so I was looking at some of the foods that are mentioned. So I will just read a couple, and then I'll ask you maybe to elaborate on the recipes. One is the frittata modo mio, so the egg omelette my way, cicorie e fave, frittelle al sambuco. Il piatto dei vacanti, these trigger my curiosity. The acqua salad that I see in a couple different places, and the baccalà. Piatto dei vacanti. It sounds interesting.
Yes, so that one really is the simplest of dishes, and it's destined to feed the traveler. So it's from San Paolo Albanese, so it's destined to feed the traveler, and because seeing that it's a very remote region, you have to make sure that you don't know where your next stop is. So this is why it's made with polenta and oils and things that are very hearty, but yet humble ingredients, right? There's almost no egg, but it's very, very sostanzioso. It keeps you. And so it's very traditional from that era, un piatto umile. When we talk about frittata modo mio, the motivation is the same. So what do you do? What do you have in your fridge? And do we have a few fresh eggs? Because meat at the time was not, it's a rarity, right? You don't really kill the animals just to have meat on a Thursday night. So it's just a specific moment. And so frittata modo mio she was a very spontaneous woman, and it happened just that way. I said, we're missing a segment. Can you share some of your recipes? And she goes, yeah, well, I was planning to do a frittatina, and let's do it a modo mio. And the secret in there was that she puts bread inside la frittata so that it becomes softer. The other, so the other,
secret. That is a secret.
Everything is inside. And then there was another one that you said about la sambuca, right? The fiori di sambuca. I had no idea that there were flowers, the sambuca flowers. And so this was an essence that was produced at the Capomonte, and this was an essence there. And they would use it to put in any of the crepes that. It's very it's also very North African in terms of recipes. There was another one that you mentioned as well.
So there was the acqua sala.
Oh, acqua sala is very interesting, because acqua sala, again, they had no name. È come la non ricetta. There's no name for that, because they said, okay, what do we have? A bit of leftover bread that has hardened. We have a few eggs. We have olive oil. So, and some onions. Really, you can't really make a gourmet meal out of it. But this is how there is a whole procedure to actually make l'acqua sala, which means salted water with eggs. So you use hardened bread before. It's a poached egg plunged into some tomato sauce, water, The onions are slightly browned with some tomato sauce, and then you plunge the egg inside and it becomes a poached egg, which then you put on the hardened bread with the un filo d'olio. Wow, we're almost due at time-wise.
Indeed. So as I said, I'm sure probably this experience has discovered even more secrets than what you had planned to go after. And I was wondering if you can share one more time,
yes,
what is the best way to catch up on your work, to follow obviously the book as far as the episodes, how people see your beautiful work.
So right now, what's going on at this point is that you can also go on my website, anitaaloisio.ca. You can also follow me on the socials as well. I'm on Instagram, Basilicata Secrets Instagram account, my own account, Anita Aloisio on Instagram as well. So that's where you feature my work. You can also visit if anyone wants to purchase the book on Guernica edition. There you have it. Thank you. So on Guernica Editions, they also sell the book. It's also available on Amazon. And we're in the process right now of translating the book in Italian. And so it should be done by this summer. The manuscript already exists. So we'll be launching, more publicity regarding that as well.
Yes, and you had indicated also at least for the shooting for the initial project, you had the region of Matera.
Actually, but the whole Basilicata
behind
it. Correct. And then I also had the Istituto, I have to say that towards the end, l'Istituto Italiano di Cultura di Montreal also participated towards the tail end to help me with the post-production towards the end.
Okay.
Right.
Well, unfortunately, our hour is up, and
yes.
il Big Ben ha detto stop. So it's time for us to say arrivederci e alla prossima. We want to thank you for tuning in into the program. If you have any questions or comments, or if you have any travel topics you would like us to address, please contact us at theitalianradiohour@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. Remember, if you or any of your family and friends have missed a prior episode or would like to listen to this episode again, please visit our website at www.istitutomonditaliano.org and click on the Italian Radio Hour tab. You can also subscribe to the Italian Radio Hour on YouTube or where you catch your favorite podcasts. We would like to thank our guest, Anita Aloisio. Our sponsor is Istituto Mondo Italiano, and alla Boara for the music. Until next time, alla prossima. Ciao, ciao.
Alla prossima. Thank you. Ciao, ciao.